I am thrilled to be with my guest today. He has started and sold 6 businesses. He coaches financial advisors, which is a very specific skill. And he's ultimately trying to help people create transferable assets that someone wants to buy. He's also been recognized as Global Exit Planner of the Year by the Exit Planning Institute. He's an author, podcaster, all around good guy. Welcome to the show, Justin Goodbread.
Thanks for having me, Laurie. Looking forward to this conversation.
Absolutely. First question, right out of the gates, Justin. I talk to business owners, I talk to advisors. I think there's some big myths out there when it comes to building value and letting go. What do you think is one of the biggest myths about being an entrepreneur that you want to call out right out of the gates?
Yeah, the title of my second book is Your Baby's Ugly. As business owners, we think our business is beautiful and everybody should want to buy. I mean, why are they not lining up to give us millions of dollars in cash? And the reality is, even though that we have blood, sweat, and tears and decades perhaps of pain and victories and failures and everything that goes along with business ownership, unless we have worked diligently to build our business where it's attractive to that ultimate buyer out there, then candidly, our baby's ugly. They're going to look at it through a different lens than perhaps we're looking at it through. And they're going to look at a business that's candidly not very purchasable or not very buyable or not very scalable. So the biggest myth is that business owners believe they have the golden grail, the golden goose, everything out there, but it's not. You have an ugly baby.
You have an ugly baby. Have you ever done a session or a webinar or a series with business owners in a room and said, hey, how many of you out there have called your company your baby? I'm just curious. I'm guessing it's probably 80, 90% of people.
I've never asked that question specifically, although I think that's a great question. Now that you've said that, I'll make sure to mention that from this point forward and give you the credit for it. But there are several statistics, and I write about this in our book, that for us as business owners, even though we may not say it, our business becomes like another child of ours. We care for it many times, and much more time is dedicated to our business perhaps than our own children. And so we see, as we work in this trade of business as entrepreneurs, as business owners, that our identity even gets wrapped up in this business. So I've never really asked that question, but I think every business owner out there who's been around more than a day or two realizes that, yes, it is a living and breathing part of our life. It is our identity. We care about it. We care about, more importantly, not necessarily the business, but candidly, Laurie, I've worked with business owners now for 30 years. And what I notice is we're hard workers. We're extremely intelligent. We don't mind risk, but at the end of the day, we care about our team, our customers, our vendors, our communities, our charities, and any other thing. And so much so that we often don't take care of ourselves. So I think the business owners out there listening to this, like, yeah, it's my baby. I've got this.
I've got this. And for people to be coachable, they need to want to open up and hear that there's opportunity to either reduce risk or improve some of the weaknesses in the business. Tell me about your experience, Justin. You're an interesting guy to talk to. I've been really excited to talk to you for a while because you're coming at it from a variety of standpoints. I'll call it the 360, right? You yourself are an entrepreneur multiple times over. And I want to start with that because we'll also talk about what you do today to help business owners. But I think there's a really important story in this narrative, which is, hey, you've lived in the trenches too. So walk me back a bit. Tell me about the origin story. How did you get started in the entrepreneurial world and where did you focus?
Yeah, that's a very interesting distinction from many coaches out there, specifically in the financial advisory or the advisory space. A lot of people who we talk to maybe have the academic knowledge. They heard a book or they went and earned an MBA, and there's not knocking that entry point. For me, it didn't begin with academia. It began with a mom and dad who raised us to be business owners. And at the age of 15, I was literally left with this ultimatum: hey, have a job by this Friday or don't come home. And it wasn't out of shrewdness. We had like the Walton or the Leave It to Beaver family. That's kind of the way we grew up. But dad's whole point, mom's whole point was, hey, we want you to learn to be a business owner. So I started my first business when I was 15. I sold it when I was 22, just after my wife and I were married. Dealt with some racism in the South that I'd never experienced. My mom and dad did not raise us to be as hateful as some people can be, just keeping it kind of simple here. So we relocated here to East Tennessee, and I didn't want to continue with the business trade I was in, which was landscaping. Honestly, I didn't want to be 40 years old and on a shovel digging a hole. And so I entered into the financial space, more around the insurance space. Didn't really like sales. I'm not a sales guy. I'm a CEO type person, but I'm also a very analytical individual. I can dive into the data points. I like the details of whatever I'm working on. So I quickly built a company and sold it in the insurance business. Found a calling into consulting business owners on how to rapidly grow value, and I started in the dentistry business, helping dentists buy practices, helping them negotiate the financial terms, deal with the marketing, basically taking the practice they bought, converting it to their own, then scaling it, and then exiting for 7 or 8 figures. And a national firm reached out to me and said, "Hey, Goodbread, we want your business. We'll buy it from you." And they made an offer I just couldn't simply refuse. Now, in all these 3 businesses, I didn't plan on building a business to sell. I built it in such a way, understanding business, that I had systems and processes and all the things that we would hear about on a typical podcast. I had built it out of my own ignorance, just out of reading books and out of a little bit of knowledge. And lo and behold, found my calling about 2017, 20 years after being in business. I'm like, there is a way to build a company that can create generational wealth for myself and my family, while at the same time still providing on the values that I care about to the customers and to my employees and to the communities. And 49 months later, had an 8-figure exit. It was a magical event. But what it showed me, more importantly, is if we can look at our business as an asset, as the largest asset on our balance sheet, and build it in such a way where it's attractive, not only do we as the business owners excel, but so do our teams, so do the employees, so do the customers that our hearts with, so do the vendors. It's whenever we really don't look at our business as an asset, instead we look at it as some income source and we'll just deal with it later, that ultimately all the people that we really care about end up getting harmed in reality.
There's a lot to unpack there. I want to go back to the dentist. You're not a dentist. You weren't trained as a dentist, but you help dentist practices become more scalable and sellable. Let's talk about that, because it's a very interesting example of niching down. You entered into it maybe in a realm of, hey, I could be over my skis here, but you were successful at it. Tell me just a little bit more about, why did you pick dental practices?
My best friend is a dentist, and he called me one day and said, "Goodbread, I'm stuck, and you understand business, and you're all the time talking as a business guy. I don't know how to do this." And one of the things I've learned, and I think I've been on proof in my own life through success and a lot of failure, is that business is simple. It's simple whenever we're on the outside of the business, reading the label of the jar. It's difficult when we're in the business trying to figure out what the moves to make. And so I decided I'm going to help my buddy in his business, we watched his business 3x in 18 months. And then he introduced me to another friend, and you know how that goes from there. And what I was looking at was, I know business, I know how to scale. Yes, I'm not what they call a wet finger dentist, where I put my fingers in somebody's mouth. I didn't even go to school for 9, 8 years or 10 years like some of these very intelligent people did. But what I saw is that you had a technician, a dentist, who literally had to use his hands or her hands in order to produce revenue, which meant that for that 40 or 60 hours a week while they're in somebody's mouth, something is happening in this company, which means that they need to have systems and structure so that they can read the tea leaves and know how the company is going to operate. The same is true for the financial advisors I coach today, or the advisors. They are technicians. If they're not in front of a client or delivering on the needs of their clientele, then their trade suffers. It's whenever we can step back and say, "Hey, I know you're a technician. Let's build a company over here that can scale rapidly," that they end up seeing the magic in their own business. So I'm a believer. You cannot take someone to where you've never been. I'm getting ready to go to Argentina. I'm excited about this. I've never been to Argentina before, and I'm going to go hunting. I'm a country boy. I like to hunt. So I have a guide down there who's going to take me into the mountain range. I've never been there. So it'd be ludicrous for me to fly down to South America, which I've never been, learn a different culture, which I don't know anything about, and try to hunt a species of an animal that I've never even seen. That'd be ludicrous. But if I hire a guide who knows it, who's been there, done that, maybe not the exact animal, but knows the terrain, knows where they're at, then I have a greater chance of success. I firmly believe for us business owners, if we can find somebody who has been there, done that in whatever industry we're in, maybe they don't have to have the exact same industry, like for example, in the dentistry, but yet they understand the methodologies of that business, then we can often excel further than if we were trying to do it on our own.
100% agree with you. And I love that description. I as the business transition Sherpa, right? Recognizing that creating a business, growing a business, and eventually letting go is part of an overall journey. And we are not going to do this on our own, right? In the first phase of building it. And certainly we're not going to do it at the end by ourselves. That's what I always advocate for. And you're underscoring that, which I really, really appreciate. I think the other thing to just call out here is that sometimes business owners want to work with people who have only come from their industry, which is fine. I can see advantages of that. And on the flip side, I think there's experiences like you have and I have where we work across industries because we're able to apply the pattern matching and the skill set and the tools across different industries. So you mentioned a couple already. You mentioned landscape, you mentioned dentistry and medical, and you also talked about financial services. So tell me about some of the exit pattern matching, if you can, in terms, and if you want to dive into any of the specifics, obviously would love that. Going from selling the landscape practice to selling your exit practice on the dentistry, and then selling the financial services practice.
Well, one of the underlying common threads there is they're all a service-based industry with recurring revenue. And so whenever we're looking at businesses, they may not have the exact same NAIC code or the same exact SIC code, but they are nonetheless the same type of business. Now, there is something to be said about working with somebody who's been in that particular industry. For example, right now, after being 20 years in the financial industry and reaching all sorts of national awards and accolades and scaling companies from startup to 8 figures and then taking an 8-figure business and doubling it in 18 months to a 9-figure business, there are some things I know in the financial industry that not many other people would know because I've been in that seat. However, there is some underlying methodologies that can be applied to every single business out there. The reality is for the practitioner, the owner of the company is ultimately who do we respect or who are we going to trust with the advice? And that's where the fall off is. Whenever we're looking at the exits of these various 3 different companies, they all had a multiple times a revenue number, whether that be EBITDA, EBOC, or NOI. So they all had a multiple times a revenue number. That's pretty much standard in the services industry. Again, the revenue number may be different. For example, the financial industry, it was EBOC, earnings before owner's compensation. In the dental business, it was EBITDA, and actually it wasn't even recasted EBITDA. It was just flat up EBITDA, earnings before interest, depreciation, amortization, and taxes. So it was very interesting calculation. Whereas in my landscape company, it was a multiple times NOI, net operating income. And that was the way each of those businesses worked, but it was still the same methodologies. Now, whenever we're looking at an exit, all the things would matter in the service industry. And we're going to deal specifically with service from this point forward in the conversation, because if we dive off into manufacturing or retail, there's some nuances there. But the vast majority, the 30-something million Americans who own businesses, the vast majority of us are service in nature. We have a good that we're trying to sell in exchange for currency, or we have a skill set we're trying to sell in exchange for currency. So in business, there are 8 areas of business: planning, leadership, sales and marketing, people, their team, operations, finance, and legal. Every company in the service industry has those same 8 areas. And there are 256 metrics in all the service industry world that drive the value of that business up. In Tennessee, we have a replica in Nashville, the Parthenon. It's a very interesting architecture, but there are a lot of pillars, if you know the Parthenon in your head, that hold up the roof. The same is true with business. There's a lot of things that hold up. You would recognize a few of them. For example, owner dependence. How many times have we heard as business owners, get out of the business, don't work in the business, work on the business? And I often say, yeah, but how do you do that? Or then we may hear things like, hey, you need to have recurring revenue. Okay, I get it, but how do I do it? Or we deal with things like, hey, we need to have a penetration type of a marketplace that if a buyer looks at our business, they say, hey, you're missing this particular market area. If we were to buy it and pour some cash into it, we could penetrate that and thus drive NOI or just drive margins up in the company. So there are 256 metrics in the business, but regardless if you're a landscaper or a dentist or a financial advisor or a doctor or a plumber or whatever you have as a business, if you could look at your business as an asset and realize there are different levers that can be pulled, which will drive the value of your company up, then you're on the right direction. Now it's a matter of, as you say, Sherpa, is who is it that you believe is best equipped to carry you to that next destination?
I think that's a great description. And We have to have the right people in the right seats when it comes to creating value and harnessing that value. You've outlined a couple of key ideas here. When you first start working with a client, and let's say current state, right? So you're working with financial advisory companies. What's the triage? Are there kind of like the top 5, top 10 questions, and you're flagging them in one category or another based on some of the answers that they'll give you?
You know what's interesting about us business owners is we do not buy information. We can get information everywhere. On my podcast, your podcast, Google, we become armchair quarterbacks. What ends up happening is whenever somebody is intrigued with a coach or an exit planner or whomever we would decide to hire, what we're ultimately hiring them for is a process or a methodology that we can execute on. Can we use their methodology to shortcut us by either saving us time or money to our destination? So to answer your question, I walk them through what I call the freedom framework. But in that framework, there's a key things that most business owners have a hard time dealing with. So for example, if I were to ask you, whomever you are listening to this particular podcast, if I were to ask you, hey, where exactly do you want to be in 60 months? What does it look like? Tell me about it. I've yet to have a business owner who can articulate that very clearly. Most of us haven't even thought about it. We know we need to make a change, but we don't know where to go. So as the old saying goes, if you're aiming at nothing, you're going to hit it every time. So one of the hardest things that we have to deal with is where specifically are you driving your company, your family, and your future? And that's a very deep conversation to have. Then you go to the next one. Okay, well, cool. We understand where you want to be. Who are you best equipped to serve? Who specifically does your company provide the best solution for? So I live in East Tennessee. You probably already gathered. I love to hunt and I like shooting my bow and arrow. So I want you to imagine in your mind's eye, there's this target in front of you and right dead center, there's a bullseye. And then outside there's another ring. And you've seen these targets perhaps in the Olympics or somewhere else, but there may be 3 or 4 rings as you go away from the center of the bullseye. And the bullseye would score 10 and the next ring would 9, then an 8, then a 7, and so forth. Who specifically are you best equipped to serve is in the bullseye. And that's who we want to draft our entire company for. Now, here's where the fall off often happens. We try to serve anybody and everybody. Why? Because in the early days, running a business, scaling a business, being a business owner is stinking tough. And so we'll work with anybody who'll fog a mirror. And now we're in business for 5, 6, 7, 10, 15 years. And we look back and we have this myriad of clients whom we care about because they are with us. But yet now the company's not positioned for that buyer. So whenever we're looking at, okay, we know where you want to be. Now, how are we going to get there? Who are you best equipped to serve? Having that conversation and dealing specifically with that avatar is the pinnacle of everything else that follows. See, because where a lot of coaches mess up on because of their ignorance or because of their academic training versus their in the trench training is until you know specifically that center bullseye, who you're best equipped to serve, you can't design your marketing programs right, your sales literature right, your operational structure right. You can't equip your team to serve that particular person. So what happens is that now as business owners, we see the target out and we're just flinging arrows at it and we're hitting a number 2. Yeah, this person over here may not even be within our wheelhouse, but we're going to take care of them. And now you lose efficiency in that business. So if you're looking for 2 or 3 little areas there, I would say number 1 is where specifically are you going? That's a hard one for us business owners to actually think about. And then specifically, who are you best equipped to serve? Now I'll give you a hint. There's a couple ways you can decide that you can uncover that by looking internally and externally in the business and yourself to figure out who that person is. One last thing, just because we're out there to serve that one person doesn't mean we're not going to serve the others. It just simply means that everything has to be pointed to that person that we're best equipped to serve or that avatar that we're best equipped to serve. And in doing so, everything that follows beneath that one conversation drives our value up.
I couldn't agree more. I love everything you said there. I think from the first off, having people articulate a future vision. Not everybody can. They struggle with that. I was going to ask you too, if they struggle with the 60 month, which is 5 year, do you ask them to shorten the time horizon? And if so, do they oftentimes have a better answer or some answer if they're struggling with a 5 year view?
It depends on the personality profile of the individual. And so the reason why I picked 5 is because most of us overestimate what we can do in a year. We underestimate what we can do in 10. So that's a statement from many people quoted over the decades now. But if you split in 5, you can then decide on what their archetype is as a clientele. And then if they're a diligent like me, they're a detailed person like me, tell me what you want to achieve in a year. Because I can't think 10 years from now. I can think what I want to achieve in a year. So whenever I'm getting ready to coach somebody, I always ask this question. Hey, man, if we're going to talk a year from now, I have one question for you. What is the one thing and only one thing that you've got to achieve come hell or high water over this next 12 months? What is that? If you can tell me what that is, man, everything else is academic for us. We can backwards engineer it. And so if they're a detailed person, then I may bring them to that one thing. If they're a dreamer or a salesperson, or maybe they're in that I quadrant of a DISC profile, tell me where you want to be. And they have a better time articulating where they want to be in 10 years. They can already taste the beach vacations. They can already see themselves riding in that hot rod car or whatever. They can see it. Now we backwards engineer us back to the details, and then you'll lose them. So it depends on who you're speaking with and what the business type is. I like to pick 5 and then vary off in the directions based on whoever that I'm speaking with.
The other part I wanted to go back to is your suggestion that we can have an avatar or different avatars of who our company is best fit to serve. And a lot of business owners that I've worked with struggle with this. There are some fears, like you acknowledge, that if I pick this one, then I'm saying no to the others. Maybe, right? It could be that it's right to say no to the others for whatever reason. It could be that, hey, it's just that you have a bullseye and you have the concentric rings. Talk about the ability to say no and the power that it has for a business owner in increasing enterprise value if they're making the right choices on that client audience.
Yeah, so I think in order for us to understand the power of no, we have to understand the power of clarity first. So let's take it out of business, because sometimes it's easier for us to talk about things in a parable type format. I desire, as an example, to have a beach house. And if I leave it at that, you may say, cool, Justin, that sounds great. Somebody might ask, well, where? Well, I desire to have a beach house in Florida. Okay, Justin, where in Florida? I decided to have a beach house in Florida in the Panhandle, where the crystal clear water and the white sands. And if I continue this dialogue, if I'm to now get down to this level for sake of time, I decided to have a beach house in Florida on the crystal sands, right on the ocean. I see it being pink with a white roof, pink flamingo in the front yard. I see it 3 stories. I can drive the car underneath. There's a swimming pool in the backyard. It has tile inside. I mean, this thing is picturesque. It's not in a neighborhood. It's not near a high rise. I mean, you can now start seeing visually this house in your head. And so now if you perhaps are driving on vacation and you drive by that pink house, you now know, holy cow, that's the house that Justin was talking about. Because there's that person. I had somebody recently on another podcast. They said, hey, Justin, who'd be a great person? I was like, I don't know. Anybody doesn't help me with anything. Give me specifically who you want to see. We narrowed it down. I said, I know somebody that fits that description. Here it is. And he's like, dude, how'd you do that? Because we get crystal clear. So whenever we say the power of no, by getting crystal clear in our avatar is, I said it multiple times, who are we best equipped to serve? That one archetype, who are we best equipped to serve? Because that is our best work. If we have like 10 of these customers, we can change their lives. We know what we can do. That is the person. But on that target, the reason why I use a target for my simple country boy mind is because not only the 10, but it goes all the way out to 1. So if you do have a client who maybe is not that 10 ring, but is way on the edge of the target as a 1, does that mean that you can't serve them? No, it doesn't mean that at all. You just may not offer them your premium service. You may not offer them your most marginal service. You see your 10 ring, the center bullseye of that target is the premium business model that you have. That is where you get your best return, your best margins of your company. And as you move outside from that center to the outsides, that's where your ancillary services come into play. So let's take it now back into business. I was consulting a bit. Again, I like working with financial advisors. Why? Because they were a 10 ring. Man, I know exactly how to solve their problems. I've done it too many times. But I have a friend of mine who runs a pool company, and he said, Goodbread, I need some help. Exact same methodology, recurring revenue, same exact structure. I'm like, dude, that's just not my thing. His exact words to me, look, man, if you can deal with the SEC and the IRS and the Department of Labor and all that crap the financial advisors have to deal with, my little simple hillbilly company, you can help me. And so it wasn't my ideal avatar. It wasn't the premium offer, but I was able to pair him up with a service and a solution that helped him move forward. Now, do I want to water down my company that much? Maybe, maybe not. It depends on my goals. Go back to that 5-year plan. If my goal is to double my value of my company, no, I don't want to dilute it. But if my goal is, hey, I want to serve as many people as I can and put them on a step forward, which is where I'm at in life right now, give them a hand up because I've been so blessed and because I had such experiences, then yeah, I want to give them something. So the power of no, go back to your root question, the power of no depends on your goals specifically. If you find yourself in your 50s and 60s and your business isn't equipped properly and you didn't save properly throughout the years, and now you're looking saying, dude, I'm broke, I got to sell my business or retire, then no is your best friend. On the other hand, if you're perhaps like me, mid 40s, and you've been blessed and you're able to do some things, and now you want to have a different methodology or a different time frame, then maybe no might not be best for you. It all depends on what that step number one is, what's your goal, and who you're best positioned to serve.
I think there's also a very interesting opportunity as you talk to clients, and as I talk to clients, I think about this too. We're understanding where they want to be, and we're working backwards. Call it reverse engineering your exit. And there's the business transition side of that. There's also the personal readiness and the personal transition, and some of the questions you've articulated are so powerful. Another way that I think about it sometimes is, can they envision who they need to be? Is that different than who they are today? Have you encountered any challenges with people where they're just from the identity standpoint or other aspects where they just can't envision being or participating in a life any differently than they are today?
Absolutely. But I think the best example is me because I'm hard-headed and I can speak to my story a little bit more openly than I can speak to others because of confidential things. So whenever I met with my coach and I was launching my company, I gave him a number. I wanted to hit $5 million in a 5-year time period as terms of valuation. No one in my family had ever done that before. We're just from simple country stock. And he challenged me. He said, I think you're going to do more than that in less time. 49 months later, we had an 8-figure exit. It was pretty remarkable. And then during that exit, my business, my baby was my identity. But for my wife, and this is a powerful story that I want you to think about as a business owner. And before I give you the story, because it's so powerful, and I hope it drives the point home that you're asking about, Laurie. In real estate, we've always heard location, location, location. How many times we heard that Century 21 made it popular back in the 80s? When it comes to business, it's all about timing, timing, timing. And if we build our business in such a way where it's an asset versus our identity, then we not only reap the immediate benefits in terms of revenue, in terms of equity, but we also reap the long-term benefits. So during COVID, like most of us around the world, my family was affected by it. My wife ended up dealing with COVID in a way that we didn't think she was going to live. 12% chance that she was going to make it through COVID. And in that time period, she asked me a question, and my coach asked me a question. This is not to beat my chest. I'm not the type of guy, but she looked at me in her feebleness, laying in the hospital bed where I'm like planning her funeral in my head. She said, Justin, what's another $1 million going to do for us? I'm like, nothing. We live a very simple life. I drive an F-150. I live in Tennessee. It's a very simple life. I mean, there's nothing that we live flashy. She said, no, it's not going to change much. I just told her nothing. She said, okay. That's all she said. Went to my coach and was asking, why would she say that? He said, because if you had unlimited time and unlimited resources, what would you do tomorrow that you're not doing today? And that shook me at my core. I said, yeah, but I haven't reached my goal. He said, your business is worth twice as much as you think it's worth, if not more. What do you really want? And in that moment, through this journey of my wife laying up in a hospital bed, now, thank God she's healthy today. Miracle happened. She's a beautiful woman. She's everything to me. But it put a different mindset in my life. And the timing was approached me in such a fact that now I had somebody who was willing to pay me a premium for a business because it wasn't my identity, because it was built properly, because it was built with value. They were willing to pay me a premium. And even though the night when I stroked the pen, there wasn't pomp and circumstance. There wasn't fireworks. In fact, it was kind of anticlimactic. It was really just a push of a button. And I'm like, that's it. And immediately I felt like a failure. Immediately in the moment. I mean, in the moment, it was like, what did I just do? Did I just give up on my dreams? Did I just let down my people? I teach at the Exit Planning Institute. I'm one of the faculty instructors. What do I tell the people, the students? We teach thousands of financial advisors and business advisors, folks like yourself, every year. What am I going to tell them? That, hey, this country boy couldn't survive? when reality was, is the very next morning after that fear kind of subsided and all of my coaching that my coach had done in my life set back and like, hey, Justin, you got a second chance here. What would you do now with unlimited time and unlimited resources? What has God equipped you for? What challenge can you solve in the future? So yeah, there's some challenges out there that business owners deal with, and I'm not gonna sugarcoat it. 4% of business owners and only 4% of those who sell their business are happy after the fact. You're listening to one of those 4% here. But the vast majority have deep regret because they didn't plan their life after the fact. They didn't get the coaching beforehand to help them position for their best chapter ever. And that's so sad to me.
That's sad to me too. It's really sad. We've worked so hard, and then even just your story about pushing the button and immediately feeling regret, mistake. Did I make a mistake? Did I let people down? Wow, right? That's a lot of emotion all coming at you. Now, it sounds like you've gotten through it and you have really good support and you know the process, and you certainly being part of the Exit Planning Institute, right? Um, Most business owners who have not gone through the thought process, the coaching, I can only imagine, right? It just feels very alone. You're alone in your head. You've set up so nicely the next thing I wanted to talk to you about, which is related to the topic of regret. In my view, there's two types of regret. We regret the things we do, and we regret the things we don't do, right? We can do it differently. We can do different timing, et cetera, et cetera. And lately I've been thinking a lot about joy, and how does joy tie in to regret? So I throw this out there with this like, hey, let's kind of workshop this a little bit for people who are not thinking about joy and happiness, right? What's the opposite of regret? It's not quite happiness, but I'm kind of putting it in that camp. So if we get to the point of making a transition, how are we okay with that transition because we own it? And just, level set here for a second. If we have a pie chart, 50% of our feelings is probably a bit innate. We can't really control it. It's kind of in our DNA, it's in our genes, it's just how we're wired, right? The other 50% of how we see the world and how we feel about it, we can try to control. So, of that 50% that we can try to control, here's some top level things and how we can maybe perceive joy. So there's going to be a question in here for you. So bear with me. So one is the ability to reframe a situation, right? And reframe that situation in a positive way. Another is to experience gratitude. And then the third is making choices to be kind and generous. Whether it's your experience, Justin, or experience that you have with your clients, people who have gone through a successful transition, they've managed their business as an asset, they've sold it to a buyer that's excited about it, and now they're in that chapter, whether it's the positive view, gratitude, being kind and generous. Tell me a little bit about how you see those things tying in as a way to prevent the exit doldrums and the exit regret.
That's a heavy question. So give me a second because that's an emotional question from me personally to answer that one. But I appreciate the question. So knowing the story I just gave you with my wife in the hospital, the prior it had a season of my life where in the 7 years I was very tough. When I say tough, if you can imagine it happening, it happened. 5 of my people in my wedding on my party had died either through suicide or other circumstances. My wife had 3 miscarriages in the 3rd trimester. I was dealing with legal battles in business. It was just a very hard time. And so now if you put that on top of the story of my wife laying up in the hospital, it brings a certain point of gravity, and maybe some might say a midlife crisis, but I think there's a certain point in our life to where we realize that time is fleeting. Tempus fugit is the Latin term. It's almost like sand beneath our fingertips. And I can remember my dad telling me this lesson, and I've adopted as my own. And that is the saddest place in the world is a cemetery, not because somebody has passed away. This is a part of life, but the fact that they have so much wisdom and experience that can help others is gone with them. Now, today in today's society, we have things like a podcast, we have books, we have technology that we can capture these things. So during this transition with all my backstory that I've kind of let the curtain back a little bit on, and this desire that how do I impact as many people as possible? There are some underlying values that each of us have. My values might be slightly different, but I don't think so. I believe that each of us were created for only what we were created for. I believe that. And most of us would say that maybe there's a passion, a dream, a calling, whatever your term is. You know, deep down in your heart, there's more to life than getting all you can, canning all you get, and sitting on your can, as the old country adage says. There's more to life than that. If it is truly about impacting others, if it's truly about helping our family, our friends, our communities, our charities, and leaving a mark, a legacy is the term that's often used, then we can then look through that lens at our business as nothing more than an asset that allows us to move to that destination. Where the paradigm comes is in that moment, leading up to having the right framework. Some might say an abundance mindset versus a scarcity mindset. Some might say, I heard somebody say recently, have you ever seen a one-sided pancake? No, because there's always two sides to everything. Just like in that moment of regret, just that brief moment of regret when I pushed that button, the next morning when I saw the bank account, I didn't have the regret. It was the opposite side of that, right? So in every moment, it's a matter of, okay, I think some age and some experience brings us to fruition a little bit easier for us. Okay, cool. That was good, or that was bad, or that wasn't what I thought it was. Now let me cast my eyes to this calling, or to this destination, or to this dream, or to this outcome that I desire. What is it what is it I was truly created for? Why am I here? Who am I best equipped to serve? And if we have those conversations, I think we move ourselves through that every type of season that we'll face. And I believe with all my heart that in a multitude of counselors, there is safety, according to Solomon. I believe that. I believe with all my heart that whenever we have consultants like yourself, advisors like yourself, coaches, ministers, friends, family around us who truly know us, and there's not that many people who will truly know us, and can grasp and ask those hard questions about where we want to be, then we can quickly move through those negativities or the negative mindset, those times where fear kind of grips us, or the time where failure, the past may hold us enabled. We can move through those and press toward their mark of that calling that we have in our life. I don't know if I answered your question purely, but it was a
I
heavy
think you
question to try
did.
to answer.
I think you did. I threw a heavy question at you, and I threw a lot at you this episode. You've been so gracious with your time. I want to recap, right? We've covered a lot of ground. We talked about your background and your journey through different businesses, creating an asset that's transferable and that has value to a buyer. We've talked about aspects of making a business more transferable and valuable. And there's different aspects of that, including recurring revenue and process focus, et cetera, et cetera. How do we punch above our weight class to do that? And we've also talked about how do we have a significant event that is life-changing in a positive way, that is sustainable towards the future vision of where we want to take it. So, whoa, that's a lot, right? This is, as you said, a heavy thing. But you know what? I really appreciate that we've gotten there, because I don't do a show that's a lightweight show. This is a show where people are going to learn and engage, and they're probably going to want to follow up with you, Justin, and learn more about what you do. So tell me how to do that. How do people find you? Well, we're going to include these in the show notes, of course.
Absolutely. So if you're a financial advisor, I'd love to schedule a free strategy call with you to talk about where you're at, what your pain points are, and where you desire to go. And let's see if there's a way that you can expedite that. If you're not a financial advisor and you want to stay tuned for some tips, check out my YouTube channel and my Instagram channel. On both of those channels, we share lots of tips that are directly applicable in your company. Directly, you can take the information, you can work with your coaching teams, you can work with your teams in your company and drive the value forward. You know, one of the things as business owners that you'll see from me is that we have a heavy load. Yeah, the questions are heavy, but it's nothing near the weight that we carry as business owners day in, day out. We feed a lot of the mouths, is the way I say it. We take care of our employees, our communities, our charities. So my job and my passion at this point is to motivate, inspire, and educate you. And that way that you can achieve everything that you've been designed for. So I challenge you to follow me on Instagram at Justin Goodbread. On YouTube, I have a YouTube channel at Justin Goodbread. And there you'll be able to continue to, hopefully I can inspire and educate and motivate you.
Oh, that's great. I'm sure people will do that. Justin, I ask everybody if they have a favorite quote. You've shared so many, but is there one that stands out to you that helps encapsulate our conversation?
You know, I've looked through who originally said this. I think it was Henry Ford. I would credit my mom and my dad because I heard it gazillion times growing up. And that is this: if you think you can or think you can't, you're right.
That's a good quote. I like that a lot. And I love that your parents had taught it to you. That's amazing. Justin, thank you so much for coming on Succession Stories. It's been great to be with you today.
Thanks for having me.
To our listeners, thank you for listening. If you enjoyed what you heard, you learned something, why not follow, subscribe, and leave a rating and review for the show? You can also find this video on our YouTube channel, which is at the Business Transition Sherpa. So stay tuned next time. Follow us, Succession Stories, and we'll be back with more great guests. Thanks so much.